AB-620, Actions and Tools in Copilot Studio, Connectors, APIs, and Authentication. In the Variables lesson, we made conversation data usable. A user gave the agent an issue, a device, a location, an urgency, and a preferred contact path. Variables gave those values names. This lesson is the next step. A variable can remember the ticket details, but a tool can do something with them. It can create a record, it can query a system, it can call an API, it can start a workflow. For AB-620, this is where an agent stops being only a chat experience and starts becoming an integrated business process. Keep one mental model in view for the whole video. User input becomes topic variables, variables become tool inputs. The external system returns outputs, and those outputs become new variables the topic can use for conditions, messages, or the next action. First, separate tools from knowledge. Knowledge is for answering from data. A knowledge source helps the agent ground a response in documents, records, or enterprise search results. A tool is for action. It lets the agent retrieve a specific record, update a system, submit a request, send a message, or call a service. That distinction is an exam clue. If the scenario says, answer questions from current documentation, think knowledge. If it says, create a ticket, update a row, call an API, submit a request, or send a notification, think tool. Let's use a practical IT service desk scenario. An employee says, my VPN is broken on my laptop and payroll is blocked. The topic collects clean values: issue type, employee ID, device ID, location, urgency, and preferred contact method. Now the agent needs 3 external systems. It needs to submit an IT ticket in Dataverse. It needs to retrieve configuration information from an internal CMDB. And it needs to look up employee IT profile data from a portal API. Those 3 integrations do not have to use the same pattern. The right answer depends on whether a connector already exists, whether the API should be reusable, whether the action is one step or many steps, and what authentication model is required. Start with the pre-built connector path. If Power Platform already has a connector for the system, that is usually the fastest, low-code route. In Copilot Studio, the maker opens the Tools tab, adds a connector, searches the gallery, and selects the action the agent should use. For the service desk scenario, the Dataverse connector can create a new ticket row. After selecting the action, the maker creates or selects a connection, then configures the tool. The name should be short and recognizable. The description should be written for the agent's orchestrator, not just for a human administrator. A weak description might say, creates records in Dataverse. A better description says, use this tool to submit IT service requests for employees, including VPN issues, hardware replacement requests, and urgent support tickets. That description gives the orchestrator the matching language it needs. The input mapping is where the variables lesson pays off. Topic.issueType maps to the ticket category. Topic.deviceID maps to the device field. Topic.urgency maps to priority. Topic allocation maps to work location. When the connector returns a ticket number, store it in topic.ticketNumber so the agent can tell the employee what was created. Now compare that with a custom connector. A custom connector is still a Power Platform connector, but it wraps an API your organization owns or exposes. It is usually defined from an OpenAPI specification and created in the Power Apps Maker portal. Use a custom connector when the API needs to be reusable across multiple agents, flows, apps, or automations. In the IT service desk scenario, the internal CMDB API is not just for this one agent. Support agents, inventory apps, and automation flows may all need the same configuration data. That reuse makes the setup overhead worth it. Before adding a custom connector as an agent tool, make sure it has been shared with the right makers. The connector might exist, but if it is not shared with CanView or CanEdit permission, another maker may not be able to add it to the agent or test it. Then the authoring flow looks familiar. Select the connector, choose the action, create or select a connection, write a strong description, and map only the inputs and outputs the topic needs. REST API tools are different. They are for a direct OpenAPI-based integration inside Copilot Studio, when no connector exists and a full custom connector is not justified. In the source material, REST API tools are called preview and not suited for production use, so keep that caveat in mind. The setup starts with an OpenAPI specification. Copilot Studio expects an OpenAPI v2 or Swagger specification in JSON format. If the source spec is OpenAPI v3, Copilot Studio can convert it during upload. After upload, Copilot Studio reads the spec and pre-populates a description. Do not assume that description is good enough. A generated description like Employee Management Service is too vague. Rewrite it as a user intent description. Use this tool to look up employee IT profiles, assign devices, access permissions, and account details from the employee portal. Then configure authentication. REST API tools can use no authentication, an API key, or OAuth 2.0. For an API key, you define the label user C, the actual parameter name the API expects, and whether that parameter goes in a header or query string. For OAuth 2.0, you configure the client ID, secret, authorization URL, token URL, optional refresh URL, scopes, organization access, and client application restrictions. Finally, choose endpoints carefully. If the OpenAPI file exposes 12 endpoints and the agent only needs 2, select only those 2. A smaller tool surface area helps orchestration choose the right action and limits unintended access. Now decide where the tool runs. Agent-level tools live on the agent's tools page. They are available for generative orchestration. The orchestrator reads the user request, compares it with tool names and descriptions, and decides whether to invoke a tool automatically. Topic-level tools run at a controlled point in a topic. Use topic-level execution when the action must happen only after a known step, such as after the agent has collected and confirmed a ticket number, device ID, or approval decision. This is another AB-620 clue. If the scenario says the agent should decide from natural language which capability to use, think agent-level tool and strong descriptions. If the scenario says the topic must run a specific action after a specific condition, think topic-level tool node. Every tool call has the same handshake: inputs in, outputs out. Inputs are parameters the tool needs. They usually come from topic variables. Outputs are fields returned by the tool. Capture only the values the topic actually uses. In the service desk topic, topic employee ID and topic device ID go into the CMDB lookup. The tool returns assigned device, operating system, ownership status, and support group. The topic might only need support group and warranty status. Capture those as topic support group and topic warranty status, then branch from there. Do not capture everything just because the API returns it. A minimal input and output schema is easier to maintain, easier to test, and less likely to create type mismatch problems later. Authentication is where many designs fail. Connector tools support user-provided credentials and maker-provided credentials. User-provided credentials mean the agent acts as the individual user. The first time the tool is invoked, the user signs in to the connected service. This is the right choice when each user has their own account and data should be scoped to that user's permissions. If the agent sends email from a user's mailbox, user-provided credentials make sense. Maker-provided credentials mean the agent uses the maker's connection for all users. This fits a shared service account model, where employees do not have their own credentials in the target system, or where every user should access the same shared resource scope. For the IT ticket system, maker-provided credentials may be the better design if employees do not have direct accounts in that system. But there is a gate. Maker-provided credentials require the agent to be deployed on an authenticated channel. If the channel is anonymous or unauthenticated, that option may not appear. So the exam pattern is not just which credential mode, It is whose identity should the system see, and does the channel support that design? When one action is not enough, use an agent flow. A connector action is good for a single lookup, create, update, or send operation. An agent flow is better for a deterministic process with multiple steps. Imagine the ticket creation process expands. The agent has to validate the request, create the ticket, notify the requester, route the ticket to the right queue, and return a confirmation code. That is a process, not just one connector call. For a flow to be callable by the agent, it needs the when an agent calls the flow trigger. It needs a respond to the agent action. It needs asynchronous response turned off for that response action, so the topic waits for the flow output. It needs declared input and output parameters. And it needs to be a solution flow, so it appears in Copilot Studio. The topic maps variables into the flow inputs. The flow returns structured output values like ticket status, queue name, and confirmation code. The topic stores those outputs and continues. Agent flows also have a timing constraint. The flow must respond to the agent within 100 seconds. If the work is longer, return a job ID quickly and continue the long-running work asynchronously after the response boundary. Then the conversation can tell the user the job was started, instead of freezing while a long back-end process runs. There is also a Canvas-native HTTP request pattern. Use the Send HTTP Request node when the topic needs a single ad hoc REST call. No connector exists, and the integration does not need to be reused across other agents or Power Platform assets. The node can build a dynamic URL with PowerFX. For example, a tracking number variable can become part of the URL. The method can be get, post, patch, put, or delete. Headers pass metadata like content type or authorization information. JSON body content can include dynamic topic variables, but never hardcode API keys or bearer tokens directly in the topic canvas. Makers who can see the canvas can see those values. Store secrets in environment variables and reference the environment variable instead. That keeps credentials manageable across development, test, and production environments. After the request returns, define the response schema from sample JSON. That turns fields such as status, estimated delivery, and last location into usable values. Store the response in a topic variable, then reference the fields downstream with dot notation. Error handling matters. If the HTTP request fails and the node raises an error, the current topic can stop and route to the system error behavior. For a customer-facing flow, that is often too abrupt. Use continue on error when you want the conversation to keep moving. Capture the status code and error body into variables. Then add a condition. If the status code is 200, show the result. Otherwise, show a friendly fallback and offer a support path. Do not expose raw API errors to the user. Now put the decision tree together. If the agent needs to answer from enterprise content, choose knowledge, not an action tool. If it needs to do something in a system, choose a tool. If a pre-built connector exists, start there. If your organization owns an API and multiple agents or apps will reuse it, build or use a custom connector. If no connector exists, the API has an OpenAPI specification and the use case is narrow, a REST API tool may fit, with the preview caveat. If the action requires multiple deterministic steps, use an agent flow. If the topic needs one quick ad hoc API call on the canvas, use the HTTP request node. For AB-620, listen for keywords: connector, custom connector, OpenAPI, REST API, tool description, generative orchestration, topic node, input parameter, output parameter, user-provided credentials, maker-provided credentials, authenticated channel, environment variable, continue on error. The final rule is simple. Variables carry the facts, tools perform the action, authentication controls whose authority is used, and outputs bring the result back into the conversation. If you can explain that chain, you can reason through most Copilot Studio action integration scenarios on AB-620.